You're tuned into our People Tech Maritime webinar with Opsealog, using vessel performance systems to provide actionable insights, not just reports. Our guest speaker is Damien Bertin, Business Director at Opsealog. If you have any questions, leave them in the Q&A section for answering after the presentation. Here's our director, Carl Jeffrey, to explain more.
So we're going to tell a story today about how Tullow Oil's anchor handling, tug and supply vessel MV Flat Confidence made big improvements in vessel performance. That's after they adopted 95% of the recommendations made by Opsealog, their vessel performance service provider. The vessel is working in Ghana offshore oil fields, and the improvement was done by the crew together with the vessel's charterers, that's Tullow Oil and Opsealog, by focusing on improving day-to-day operating practices. So Opsealog does it by splitting vessel operations into 5 specific modes. So port operations, port standby, in transit, in field operations, and in field and on standby. And in each of those 5 modes, crew will have habits to behave in particular ways. And you can use the vessel performance data to understand what those behaviors are and then see if they could be better. So Opsealog and its clients put a big focus on getting data in a way which is possible to work with. They say vessel performance data can be as useless as a big stone, or it can be like a diamond, depending on how you manage it. And we're going to hear today from Damien Bertin, who's the business director at Opsealog, joining us from Marseille. He's going to explain how they moved from a focus on reporting, which many crew are getting quite sick of by now, to this focus on getting actionable insights. Damien is also a former head of commercial marine services with Bourbon Offshore. So we're going to have a talk. We're going to have a talk of about 20 minutes, and we'll take your questions. So Damien, I'd like to invite you to start your talk.
Thank you very much, Carl. Thank you very much to People Tech Maritime for the opportunity to speak a bit more about how we, Opsealog, really see the added value and the potential that is contained with the report. So I'll try to share my screen. Is it okay now?
Yeah, full screen mode. Yep.
All right. And thank you also for the perfect introduction. I think in a few words, you've captured what is really at stake here, talking about making the difference between a stone and a diamond. I think that's a very nice way to present the context. So before we get into more details on how we, Opsealog, manage, use the data to ultimately generate performance, because this is exactly what we have been made for, to generate performance. Let's first get some step backs and have a look at what the data and the reports look like today on board supply vessels.
You're just sharing a little message at the bottom of your screen. Votre écran est partagé. That's it.
So let's start with one key figure here. We hear more and more that vessels are connected. They have sensors on board. They have a good access to internet connection. That's true. That's reality, especially for the new builds, and the vessels are getting more and more sophisticated. So yes, in principle, they are able to share more and more data. But reality is that only 10%, around 10% of the fleet can really share data ashore in real time. So it is going to happen. It is improving. But as of today, as we are speaking now, only around 10% of these fleets are able to share data in real time. In the same time, shore teams, management, being ship owners, managers, or charterers in the oil and gas industry, still require reports and still require to be connected with the vessel to at least know what the vessels are doing, how they behave. And how can you do that? Still with daily reporting. And daily reporting is still today one of the biggest burden on board for the crew. And vast majority of this reporting is done via well-known formats such as spreadsheets and email. So reality is that reports are still today the main and biggest source of how to generate data from the vessels to shore. It's a burden. I mentioned that. That's true. When we talk to seafarers, to crew members, that's still a burden because they are asked for more and more reporting. Sometimes the same data points are requested in different formats or units. We have seen instances where the vessels were asked and required to report the same information via 5 different ways. So, in other words, that means a vessel shall report their activities in 5 different formats, information being the same. And something important here is that when we speak about reports, we also have to remember why these reports were made and what is their original aim. They were not built to generate performance, actually. Reports are a way to connect vessels to shore and to measure, monitor the operations and how the contract obligations are being met or not by ship owners, for instance. So that's very important. Reports originally were not built to generate performance, but it doesn't mean they can't generate performance, and this is the aim of this presentation. This has been well understood by ship owners, charterers. We have seen internal initiatives within some of our customers, or when we discuss with stakeholders and operators in the industry, we understand that some of them are trying to develop performance tools based on the reports. That's a big challenge for them because it requires expertise, knowledge, and experience. And this is what we have been doing over the last 10 years with Opsealog, is to understand how we can really get insights from these reports and not just remain at the stage of reporting. One of the probably main takeaway we understood after 10 years of operation is that all this shall be based on one keyword, pragmatism. Why does pragmatism mean? It means first, it requires clarity on objectives. If you don't know exactly what you expect out of a report, there is a high chance that you won't meet the objectives. So defining objectives is probably the first step. Why are we using the reports to generate insights? What are we expecting as information from these reports? What are we targeting as improvements? So these are the kind of objectives we define together with our customers. Misalignment in targets, that's very close to objectives because you may have within the same organization different targets. To give you some real example, the logistic teams may want to get insights and reports from the vessels with certain objectives, while the cost control team definitely would have other targets in mind. This can be aligned. I mean, it is fair, and that's the way it is. They have different targets, but you can use the same source to achieve different targets. So being pragmatic here means people should have an instance where they discuss together and try to rely on the same source to align their targets and objectives. And how can you do that? The best way to proceed is to dedicate, to nominate owner of the project. Without ownership, without one owner of this project, digitalization project, for instance, there is a high chance again that you end up with different projects, as many projects as you have stakeholders. To come back to my example, the logistic team may define their objectives and own the project, while the cost control team or the fuel management team would also define their project. And eventually, you end up with as many projects as you have stakeholders. Something also that the experience have shown is that, and this is not just true for us, it's true for IT projects. These projects, they change over time. There are adjustments, people may change their expectations, so you have to be ready for that. Doesn't mean we would recommend to accept all changes, otherwise this becomes an everlasting project. But you need to cope also with changes. Sometimes better solutions arise through the project. It requires expertise, anticipation, and agility. And last but not least, if you really want to move from getting reports to using these reports as performance insights, data quality is key. We are used to saying that poor data quality at the entry will lead to wrong insights or insights that you can't use. So with this pragmatism approach in mind, as you rightly said, Carl, yes, you can convert a stone into a diamond. I mentioned data quality. That's what we would consider one of the biggest and main success factors in achieving the insights objective and the performance optimization objectives. So we are used to comparing data quality, and I would even say not quality only, but how we care about the data. We are used to comparing that to an iceberg. Because when you connect to a data visualization platform, for instance, you see the visible part of the iceberg. And that's very important. But the invisible part is probably as important as the visible one. When you see your insights, KPIs, probably you have no clue about what is happening under the surface. So it starts from the very beginning. It starts at step number 1 when it comes to collecting data. So collecting data at this stage, you may get wrong data or data that has to be a bit controlled. And this is exactly what we do when we get reports from the vessels, because human can make mistakes. There can be errors in the reporting. So we have dedicated time, expertise, so that at the very beginning, we can block reporting that is not correct and discuss with the stakeholders, usually the vessel's crew, to adjust the reporting. So from the very beginning, we get good quality data. But how can you ensure this data is of good quality if you don't know yourself what this data is about? And this is second point. It requires technical knowledge. Technical knowledge means not only about the data and how we manage it. This is important as well, but technical in terms of knowing what the vessel's operations are, how they should report, what should be considered as a wrong or very surprising data. And this is what we have in-house. That's the combination between marine, oil and gas expertise, and data expertise. With this context, at this stage, we can already filter quite a lot of incorrect data points that are reported. Then comes the technology into the game. Technology, of course, everyone thinks about AI now. That's very powerful. We use it more and more. But this is powerful if and only if you know what you want to get as a result again. Using AI works if you know what you would tell to the AI, what you want to check as data quality. So we use as AI. We also have built algorithms that we keep improving and entertaining and living. That's like a living material for the last 10 years. And this combination between AI, algorithms, and vessels knowledge expertise ensure that at the end, we have proper data points that are properly reported, that are of good quality, so that they can be pushed to the visible part of the iceberg. And to give you some example, visible part means what? Means you have access to data visualization platform with your metrics. We want this platform to be as user-friendly as we can. And also, there are some protocols according to which, thanks to which, we can share data, being like APIs. So the iceberg comparison illustrates pretty well, I think, how the data should be taken care of. But visible part is really important as well, because if you really want to take actions from the insights, you also need to get access to tools and processes that will help you make decisions out of this. It will not make sense to collect thousands or millions of data points if ultimately you don't get access to what will help you make a decision. And here again, this is related, this is somehow very similar to pragmatism. Visibility is key, not only because the platform should look nice, but also because the information that is displayed on the platform or on the tools or the analytics shall make sense pretty quickly. Complexity in this kind of situation really kills execution. It's quite attractive to display as many data points as you can, but actually that's a drawback. If there is too much information contained in one single platform, you easily get lost and actually don't know what information should be used for which objective. 60 seconds is the time that it should take any user to see whether or not the fleet is performing. At least this is one objective we have in mind. When users connect, we want to guide them and put them in a situation where they can see quickly how their fleet is performing and ideally whether the fleet is performing or not. But what does performing fleet mean? It depends, because what is a good performance for users A may be different from client B, for instance. So here, that's important to define the objectives. And each of the stakeholders and the clients we work with may have different objectives in mind. But for sure, we would recommend that all of them define smart objectives. Objectives that can be measurable, that can be achieved. These are the two key points. And how do you measure these objectives? First, you need to monitor and get information from the reports. To give you an example, with the reports, you will know what the fuel consumption of a vessel is. This is information. This is not performance yet. It becomes performance when you add to this monitoring information objectives and/or benchmark. Sometimes we have to spend time with customers, and that's very powerful, to define the objectives, because either they are not defined yet within their organization or because they want to prioritize. So that's very key. To summarize here, what we intend to do with the visible part of the iceberg is to give access to a user-friendly data visualization platform with accessible information on which each user can rely to make decisions. I'll give you an example now related to another topic. Fuel is obviously one of the main parameters on which you can improve performance, but there are others. Idle time, for instance. This is also a key point, and more we have an initiative with our users to improve idle time. Why is that so important? First, you need to understand what is really idle time as a whole within the operations of the vessel. And some of us may be surprised. We are not surprised anymore because it's been the trend for the last 10 years. 50% of their time, offshore support vessels are idle. In other words, it means that half of their time, these vessels are not used or are not producing any operational output. So that's something definitely that can be improved. Obviously, vessel won't be working 100% of their time. That's not achievable. So how do we proceed? We define objectives based on what we have been able to measure. In defining objectives with this specific topic about idle time, that's a very strong and powerful way to encourage partnership between the ship owners and the charterers. Why that? Because some of the idle time are related to vessels' behavior. Some of the idle time are related to logistics organization. But having a common base, monitoring and relying on one common data source is the starting point for discussion. We've seen that in the past, and I will show you and explain a bit further how it worked with the MV flat confidence, for instance. So, and if you want to have a look, I mean, it's quite surprising at the beginning when you first realize that it's pretty well splitted. The on-field operation, for instance, 26% of their time, vessels are idle, waiting on field. So this is typically a topic that can be discussed between ship owners, charterers, so that ultimately vessels are going on site once the site is ready with the proper speed. So there is a lot of recommendations that can be issued around that. And this is what we have been doing with the MV Flat Confidence and their charterers, Chulo Ghana, We mentioned them specifically because the MV Flat Confidence was the first vessel to which we delivered an award, the most performing vessel of the year operating for Tullow Ghana. And in a few minutes, I will show you some of the key results. But before that, in a real case, because we explain how it works, being pragmatic, collecting the data, making sure that we have the right quality, and ultimately to the data visualization platform. So in a real case, the MV Flat Confidence case, for instance, how did it work? We collected data, and we keep collecting data on board this vessel, being data from our reporting solution, being sensors as well. We also collect data from some of the sensors that are on board. Originally, we had to make some adjustments to make sure that everything was collected properly. It didn't take that long. Then delivery reports the same. And thanks to the very high commitment of the crew and very high commitment of the Tullow Ghana operations team, we quickly were able to speak the same language, if I may say, in terms of reporting, explaining why it was required this way, explaining why the quality was important. And ultimately, discussing with the crew, we understood that the way the vessel reports today is much better to them than what they used to do, because it's digital, it saves time for them. So it was a win-win-win situation at this stage already. Data quality, yeah, I mentioned that we checked. We ensured that the process was under control. And then came the algorithms into the game. And this is at this stage, algorithms, expertise. And this is where we started including some performance into the process. So reporting is definitely the key point. You need reporting to generate performance, but performance starts when you can combine what has been reported with expertise, with objectives, and also recommendations. Because otherwise, you may have objectives. With no actions, this would remain only objectives. So together with the crew, with Tullow Ghana, we implemented recommendations. We made sure that these recommendations were applied, and these are the results. Overall, in a 1 year time, together, we managed to save more than 730 cubic meters of fuel. This equals to approximately 2,000 tons of CO2 emissions avoided. So these are the results. But how did we together achieve these results? Because of applying, thanks to the application of the best practices. To give you one example, and you can see that on the screen, vessel has applied 95% of the best practices that could be applied on field when she was in standby. Best practices means the practices that would help optimize to the largest extent. So 95% of that time, the crew members applied the best practices, leading to the results I previously presented. And in terms of savings, 91% of what could have been saved by the vessels. Again, this has been possible thanks to the great collaboration between vessel, charterers, and Opsealog. Before concluding, understanding your data is one thing. Yes, that's for sure, and this is the starting point. But acting on it, especially now, because of what we can see in terms of fuel price, for instance, is no longer optional. At least this is what we trust. It's probably more time than ever to think about how you can get insights from your reports, use the material that is contained, and convert this stone into diamond. Thank you very much. We are Opsealog, a French company based in Marseille. We have been operating in the oil and gas industry for a bit more than 10 years now. We work worldwide. Our solutions are deployed worldwide. And I'm more than happy now to answer any of your questions.
Well, very good. Thank you very much. We're open for questions if you want to stop screen sharing. So there is got one question in here already. So Noordin van der Linden, his LinkedIn says he's performance engineer with Splitoff. That's a dry cargo shipping company in the Netherlands. But he's asking about sensor data, what measures do you have in place to ensure that the sensors are always providing accurate values and are not malfunctioning?
Thank you very much. So just in terms of context, we Opsealog are not sensors providers, but we trust that working with sensors providers or other data providers is key to optimize performance and also to get access to more data. This said, we have been working with a hardware provider, and we collect data from their solutions, from their sensors. So we don't have access directly to the mechanical part, or we can't assess that. But thanks to the algorithms, thanks to the benchmark and the data points, the historical data we have, we are able to cross-check all these data sources. And sometimes manual input is different than what we get, for instance, for fuel consumption, than what we get from the fuel monitoring systems, because the manual reporting was wrong. But sometimes manual reporting is right, and we can detect malfunctioning of the sensors. Very recently, we had a very constructive discussion with one provider of EFMS, and it helped clarify that 10 vessels actually suffered from malfunctioning of their sensors. That's fair. I mean, it should not be hidden. That is fair. Then this requires actions from the manufacturers to correct, repair the sensors. So as a summary, thanks to algorithms, thanks to our expertise and historical data, we can always benchmark different data sources. So at the end, the data is of good quality and can be used by the stakeholders and operators, for instance.
Very good. So we're going to Nigeria now. So it's a question from Uchenna Emenyonu. He's a director for Blue Economy Research at Development Nigeria Limited, but we're sticking with sensors. How do you calibrate your sensors before taking readings? Also, which algorithm do you apply for data analysis or effective optimization of vessel fuel? I think that's your own algorithm, isn't it? But yeah.
Yes. So again, on sensors, we don't calibrate sensors, not ourselves, but we have regular communications with the sensors providers who are somehow like our partners. So we don't calibrate them, but we ensure, because we have the same customers. So what really matters at the end is that sensors providers and us deliver the best quality service to the customers. Then data analytics, yes, that's one of the key points. Maybe we will have to dedicate another webinar for that. How can you use expertise and data or AI to really generate powerful data analysis? And how does it work in a nutshell? We collect data from different sources, and data analysis is like the brain of our solution. We can cross-check this data, we can combine them with ultimately the objective to give proper insights, because it's tempting to use all the data points to generate as many reports or as many analytics as you can, but eventually you end up with no decision. So it's better think big, but start small. Think with right objectives. You want these objectives to be achieved. Get the right analysis, get the right results, and this is the learning curve, and this is how we keep improving together with our customers.
Yeah, very good. And you mentioned the practices for on-field, on standby. 95% of practices were adopted. What can you give an example of what the practices were? You're talking about auxiliary engine optimization mainly. So I can't imagine what you can do differently with the vessels on stand. Oh, dynamic positioning. That's the other one, isn't it? You mentioned.
I think you understood almost everything, Carl. Behavior and it's dynamic positioning. Definitely, historically, is one of the most fuel-consuming mode. And whenever you don't need to be on DP, don't use DP. It may seem obvious, but again, if you don't have access to the data and first understand how long the vessel spend on DP mode where it is not required, you can't do anything. And it's particularly important in the 500-meter zone for the oil and gas industry, not only to optimize fuel consumption, but also for safety reasons. If vessels have no operations ongoing or no operations planned in the 500-meter zone, they should not be sitting idle in the 500-meter zone. So these are typically the kind of best practices. Engine configuration as well. Use auxiliary engine, slow drifting mode. There are different ways depending on the operational context. In some areas, you can't go drifting because of other installations. In some, you can. But this you can know when you have access to all the data and have the experience.
Yeah, very good. So we're going to Togo now. So Ismaila Adoyi, she's LinkedIn says informaticien maintenance et research informatique at ZAC Informatique. What do you do about missing or inconsistent data? Do you just remove it, or is there something else you can do?
So we try to correct as much as we can. First step, we try to correct as much as we can. Especially for the manual reporting, there is usually a way to get in touch with the crew and ensure that the right reporting will be generated. Sometimes we can't change or correct the data when they come from sensors or so we can adjust based on patterns because we have thousands, not to say millions of data points. And if it doesn't impact so much, yes, we can correct thanks to our expertise experience. But when these data points are really crucial, such as weather conditions, or we usually try to correct as much as we can. And to correct, again, the more data sources we can use, the easier it is to correct. If you have 10 different data sources around the same topic, probably you won't have 10 data sources reporting wrongly. Most likely you will get 6, 7 reporting the same kind of information, so you can rely on that. The more data we have, the better the quality is, definitely.
Well, very good. So back to the Netherlands. So Noordin van der Linden from Splitoff is asking, how do you make sure crew on board don't feel like they're being constantly monitored, like Big Brother is watching you? I guess one thing you do is give them awards to reward them for their engagement and encourage their engagement, I guess.
I mean, they have been watched for forever. Since the reporting exists, they could have considered that they are under watch by Big Brother. The difference is that we offer a digital way of reporting. There is actually not much difference between Excel sheet and digital reporting. You need to report what you do. The big difference is that, yes, thanks to a digital reporting and with a proper process, people are using the reports and they make decisions based on it. So this is what makes the difference. But something to overcome this challenge is to give feedback to the crew. Because like all of us, if you generate reporting and you don't know what these reports are used for, it doesn't make sense. It's absolutely different when you show people what you can do with what they report. They feel more responsible. They feel more part of the chain, of the value chain, and this works. This works.
Oh, very good.
It's basically about change management somehow and educate the crew, and we take that very seriously. We dedicate time to onboard the newcomers. When we have a new vessel, we dedicate time to explain how it works. We have a support team able to assist them because we know, I mean, some of us were seamen before joining Opsealog and or have been working in the industry. And we know how painful it can be for the seafarers to have all these reports to fill on a daily basis. And we really mean it. That's a burden for them. So we try to be as much sensitive to that or they're partners in this task.
Wow, very good. So we're going to the Middle East now. I think Qatar. So Jaya Chandran Mohan, technical superintendent for OSV, offshore shipping vessel, I think, open in the Middle East. So the cost of the implementation of the measures is paid by the ship owner, but the fuel savings are achieved by the charterer. So why a vessel owner is going to spend on systems? Because I noticed you didn't mention the vessel owner once. You mentioned Tullow Oil, the charterer, many times. I guess the answer is you got Tullow Oil was driving this. Were they?
That is correct. And thanks for this question. This is quite a key point, and having worked with a ship owner, I understand pretty well the point. Actually, we don't install any system on board. So that's first difference. There is no upfront fee and no hardware cost. That's first point. Second point, indeed, oil and gas companies, charterers are paying for fuel. And these today are our main clients. Our main customers are the oil and gas companies, even if we work with some ship owners. But then the opportunity for ship owners is different. Probably they may not be interested as much in saving fuel because they don't pay the bill. That's partly true, because as a ship owner, if you want to be proactive and be a good partner to your charterers, it's always good to demonstrate that you take initiatives to save fuel. But their main focus, yes, that's fair, is not around reducing fuel consumption. It's about, for instance, optimizing the way their vessels are used. Engine running hours, for instance. If you apply best practices, ultimately, you would reduce the engine running hours that are used and extend the life of your assets. Reduce the risk of breakdown. You may also want to know the performance of your crew. And also, as a ship owner, doing that myself in the past, it's good to come to your charterers with solid data that you can show and say, yes, maybe this month's consumption was higher, for instance, but let's have a look why. Because vessel was instructed to sail on the field and the site was not ready. Because the crane driver could not pick up the cargo. And so forth and so on. So objectives can be different, but as I mentioned as the introduction of the presentation, this can be aligned.
Yeah, very good. And Amit Mishra, who's a fleet performance subject matter expert in the UK, is asking for examples of best practices other than switching the dynamic positioning off, or for non-DP vessels.
Okay, so we are talking about the secrets here.
No, you have to buy Opsealog to get the answer to this question.
Not buy, but we can have a separate conversations. We'll be more than happy. Actually, we have like 500 practices that can be adjusted. This is not rocket science. I mean, we don't pretend that we make a revolution on how vessels and logistics can be optimized. Actually, when I showed the graph on the idle, when you see that, say, oh, that's shocking. I mean, 50% of the time vessels are not producing. Let's reduce to 30%. But if you don't know that they are doing 50% of their time idle, you can't do anything. Then how can you optimize that? For instance, idle time, yes, we work on installing buoys, mooring buoys when it is possible. Practices, engine configuration, speed, routes, instructions. We have triggers, alerts, optimization also on the way you load the cargo, because vessels are paid for a certain capacity. Why would you pay for a 1,000 square meter deck space PSV if, as an average, you only use 200 square meters, for instance? And this is possible because we have been working since the beginning with more than 1,000 different vessels. So we have extensive knowledge of more than 400 vessels designs, being engine configurations, power, generators, and so that's how we can generate the best practices. But more than happy to share a bit more on the best practices on the separate session.
Oh, very good. So back to Nigeria now. Uchenna Emenyonu is asking, are we using the sensor data for predictive maintenance or only for fuel optimization? I guess this comes back to you saying it's very important to know what your objectives are before you start. If you've got multiple objectives,
yes. Yeah, you can work on both. I mean, we don't do sensors again, and predictive maintenance is not our core focus, but we have partners who provide solutions, hardware that can help on predictive maintenance. Our main focus since the creation of the company was reducing fuel consumption and, as important, gas emissions. So, but as I mentioned previously, there are many other topics: logistics, the way vessels are used. We can optimize that. If ship owners are interested with predictive maintenance, we can certainly work with our partners and find the right way to get access to the right data and generate the right insights.
Oh, very good. So now Dazaki Ridho, I don't know where he is. I'm looking up. What data do you use to compare the engine is in good performance and the variable of the engine parameter make sure the engine is in good performance? You didn't mention declining performance of the engine at all, but I don't know if that's something you're getting into or not, is it? Or
That's something we can get into. How do we do that? Again, we've been working for 10 years, collecting millions of data points and having historical data around 1,000 vessels. So let's assume, for instance, a well-known design, a UT755. We have millions of reports for a UT755. And thanks to algorithms, to our database, to AI, to our experts, we can pop if one of the engine is showing different results than the other. Doesn't mean we know the truth, but at least this is the starting point for ship owners, for charterers to investigate. This is how, to give you an example, we managed to understand that one vessel actually overconsumed because two of the engines out of four were really in bad conditions. And how did it end up? The charterers probably did not realize that this could have an impact. They saw the impact on the fuel consumption, discussed with the ship owner, and they agreed to stop the vessel for some time just to fix the issues on the engine. Because at the end, objectives can be common. You want the vessels to work as much as they can, not preventing their integrity, and also not consuming too much. So having access to the report, generating the right insights, enabling them to discuss together and make the right decision, ultimately, this helped overcome the challenge.
wow, Dazaki, I think I found you on LinkedIn, technical officer at Marathas Group in East Java. Wow, you're up very late. Thanks for joining us. Yeah, very good. There's a question from me. I was thinking of an analogy with a home. So we got all these smart meters in our home that give us all this data we can't really do anything with. And what we might want to know really with our own houses is if we want to get a better dishwasher, or we need to tell our teenage daughters to spend less time in the shower. And it's very hard to get that data from this smart meter data they're giving us. And that seems like like what you're doing as a provider is you create stories out of the data, don't you? And you also show people what specific habits they can do. And that's why your approach is different to what the approach a lot of other companies take, isn't it? I think. I don't know if you...
Exactly. I mean, the comparison is pretty good. We have another one. It's like going into a diet. You may see your weight, but if you don't monitor, you have access to the information, like you said, for the heat at home. But okay, it's 23 degrees. Okay, what do you do with that? Same with your car. When you drive the car, say, fine, I burnt 8 liters per 100 kilometers. What can we say with that car? What can we do? Say, is it good or is it bad? I mean, if you drive a very powerful Italian sports car, probably that's not bad. If you drive a small city car, that's probably too much. Then, okay, but where were you driving this car? Was that in the city? Was that in a highway? So you have the data, but if you don't know how to use it, and same for your example, what shall I do with this data around the temperature, the consumption? You need experts, you need a process, and you need objectives. Say, is that an objective for you to reduce your home temperature? If yes, okay, set up the process, make sure that you have the right data point, that you will try to implement best practices, measure the benefits, and make sure the optimization is ongoing.
Oh, very good.
We are like, I mean, it's like being the eyes of our customers, because first you need to get access to this information and then be able to generate insights from it.
Yeah, people get too stuck into the data world, but really need expertise to tell people what to specifically do and engage them. And yeah.
Very much so, yeah.
Oh, very good. So going to Nigeria now. Oladeyi Sadiq is I think he's with Cyberg Enterprises, Cyberg Dom Techno Enterprises. Do you think ship engine emissions analysis plays a significant role? I don't know. You didn't say anything about what specific sensors you're using. There's not many people doing emissions analysis, but you doing any of that?
Emissions analysis, at least for the main categories of gas that are emitted, CO2, SOx, NOx, NOx, we can get that. And this will become probably a bigger challenge in the years to come because of regulations, because of fines. Recently, Norway announced that by 2029, all the OSVs operating in Norwegian waters should have solutions to reduce their emissions. I mean, these are not just words, but Norway will implement that by 2029. And usually, what happens when Norway implements something, Europe follows. So, how we will get that? Probably sensors will play a role. And as I mentioned at the introduction, vessels are more and more connected. There's hundreds or thousands of sensors on board. So the challenge is not really there. The challenge is to have all the providers, the stakeholders, work under an ecosystem.
Yeah,
And
I
this
think
is
the
what
question.
we are promoting as well.
Yeah, but the question is specifically, can you use analysis of the emissions to help improve performance? But I think.
Yes, definitely. I mean, if
I've lost your.
it's an objective to optimize.
Well, your internet connection has got a bit shaky, but
It looks like, but is it okay now?
it's better now. Yeah, very good. So back to Qatar, Jaya Chandran Mohan. Do I correctly understand you primarily analyze the vessel operating pattern against fuel consumption and provide recommendations to optimize the operating practices, not the maintenance aspects? I think that's pretty much correct, isn't it?
That is correct. We spoke about fuel, but not only fuel. We also have access to, we collect data that will help optimize logistics, optimize planification, optimize cost allocation. That's something that is quite different, but you know how it works. Companies, oil and gas companies, there are several stakeholders within the field. So if you, thanks to the AIS data, to change a bit about data sources, we know how long a vessel spent in location A, B, C, and automatically we can generate reports that will help allocate costs properly for the users.
Wow, very good. So back to Nigeria, Olade Sadiq. He's asking about emissions analysis on engine performance, and yeah, that's what we just talked about, wasn't it? I think you can use emissions analysis for engine performance and fuel efficiency, although it's maybe not something many people do so far, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah. I mean, the big picture here I like is this whole emphasis on human expertise and deciding where you want to go and working out how to get there rather than just this idea you can shove a lot of data in a machine and it tells you what to do, isn't it? I think that's how I would summarize your approach here. You have the experts involved all the way along, and
Yeah, I mean, this is same as with AI to do the comparison. And you know how Microsoft called their AI tool? It's Copilot. So actually, reports, algorithms, they are very powerful and they are a must to generate performance, but they shall be used as copilot of experts. It's very exciting to get access to this data and to the technology. But if you don't know how to use it, you end up lost, and you don't generate savings and you don't optimize performance. I mean, this is the reason why I joined Opsealog a bit more than 6 years ago, because I was convinced that data could and should play a key role in optimizing vessels' performance. And 6 years later, I'm even more convinced, thanks to more data coming, maturity of the industry picking up. So the best is to come.
yeah, but only data together with human expertise that can work out what it's actually saying and if it can tell you something useful or not, isn't it? Yeah.
Indeed.
Yeah, well, that's very good. Well, there's no more questions. We can, I guess we can finish there if you like. I don't know if you want to leave people with any closing words, or you'd like people to contact you and do trials from. I mean, you mentioned offshore, but I imagine other types of companies as well. You'd be happy to hear from.
We are more than happy to talk to anyone who is interested and passionate about optimizing performance. And if this is something we can't really provide now, that's always interesting to discuss, share our experience. And no, I will let you conclude. But before that, thanks again for the opportunity. Thanks again for all the questions to the attendees. Hope you enjoyed that. And if you have any question, we are Opsealog, so opsealog.com, and you can contact us and connect anytime. almost all of us are available on LinkedIn, so don't hesitate.
Oh, we've got one more question from, I think this is Peru, Octavio. I'll look him up after. Data is important at different stages. Port vessels spend many time at anchorage waiting for an available berth. And it'd be interesting to share with port agents, terminal and port, the vessel consumption, emissions and fuel, cost of delays to search and improve for ports performance. We're going to blame the ports for keeping the ship waiting now. Do you want to share any thoughts on that one?
I mean, this is something we see specifically on the oil and gas industry. Usually there are ports, but dedicated to the oil and gas industry. But you see that, I mean, vessel standing by, waiting for berth availability or being instructed to sail from berth A to berth B to berth D. It's amazing. End of the year, we are talking about thousands of CO2 tons that are emitted because of organization. So, but before blaming, I mean, it's good to know where the responsibility lies. Is it a matter of logistic team, ashore, onshore? Is it a matter of the vessel's behavior? So this example about port is a great one. Is a great one. And yes, we can have access to that. Not to blame anyone. We are not there. We are not judges, but we highlight what could be done and improved.
Well, that's great. I don't think we've had questions from Peru and Indonesia and Nigeria and Togo all in one webinar. So that's and the Netherlands. So thanks very much. Well, that's great. I shall pass back to Farah for the closing words. Cheers.
Thank you to Opsealog, Damien Bertin, and to our audience members. Contact details and a video link will be sent out soon. Check out our website or our next webinars. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.